A 1 hour vlog 2 years after the event. Only CGP Grey could make that work.
Well, Myke, you're already messing with the timeline.
Oh, yeah?
First of all, we don't even know if it works because, once again, Cortex recording schedule is always somehow slightly off from video release schedule.
Yeah, okay, so I've seen it and I really enjoyed it. So it worked for me.
Right. But in the real world, what has just occurred is, for apparently no reason, there was a driving trip streamed on the CGP Grey YouTube channel.
American Grey Simulator, as I called it.
Yeah. In the actual timeline, that's what's happened. It's like you're jinxing the release of the video. It's not successful yet. It hasn't come out. Who knows if it's actually going to work? But that will be up in a couple days from recording time. So
yeah, but you see, this is where we get into the time paradox that is this show, right? So I'm trying to deal with it as like it's already out there, but now we're going back again.
This is a thing I've thought about a bunch of times ever since I've started podcasting. But then additionally, when I decided like, I'm going to play around with the vlog format, is I'm living this non-linear life of like recording times going forward and back in time. Like there's Cortex episodes that are out of time. And then I'm looking at footage, which is from years ago, but I can combine it with footage that's from yesterday. And even if you look at depending on how you want to count them, 3 or 3.5 vlogs that I've put up on YouTube, the time gaps between them are enormous and things are out of order. And it's like, I've released this vlog about wanting to pay attention more. And then now I'm going to release something that happened years before that ever occurred. So yeah, I have this totally non-linear life.
This is Summer of Grey Part 2. Parts 1 and 3 were posted a year ago.
Oh God, I forgot. That's right. That's the other time linear part. People have already seen the end. They saw the end a year ago.
Because that's the funny thing of like, there's so much drama in this video, but we all know you're alive.
Right.
But like, there is this like, I'm watching it. So it's a video about a road trip that Grey took a couple of years ago. Like that's in a nutshell. Yeah. You should watch it. I thought it was very, very, very good. But you totally succeeded in, I'm watching the video and I'm worried. But like, one, I know about the trip because you were telling me while it was happening. And two, I know it was 2 years ago, right? And you sent me the link, so I know you're okay. But I was still worried about you.
Well, I mean, I guess it works then. I guess it works on an emotional level, at least on a mic. But yeah, so this is a thing that I'm very glad in the current timeline will soon be released.
/ has already been released.
/ has already been released in my horrifically nonlinear life. I'll be very, very, very glad to be done with this project. I've been telling my wife the past 2 weeks as I've been really making the final push on this thing, like constantly. I've been telling her like I think there is literally no project that I will complete that I will feel better about having it just finally done, because this is one of the projects that's been with me the longest in an active or semi-active state where like I've been tinkering with it. So I'm very relieved it's over soon.
I remember you sending me like clips of the driving a long time ago.
Yeah.
Like a long time ago. Being like, oh, what do you think of this? Like, like when there's like a couple of shots where you have what is effectively like a rear view mirror in the corner while you're driving. And like, it's wild. Like that was such a long time ago. What happens that it takes that this is a project which is in the works for 2 years? Like what happens that results in that?
Okay. I'm going to dramatically simplify things. But listeners of Cortex, they will know that I have occasionally made reference to a behemoth project which has been a tremendous pain in the ass a bunch of times over the past 2 years. This is that project.
Right.
I looked this morning because I wanted to get the exact number for you. If you combine the road trip dash cam footage with the footage that I shot on the actual trip, the total amount of generated footage is just over 1 terabyte of data. That amount of data, for me, constantly caused huge technical problems. Huge, dispiriting technical problems that would cause me to abandon the project for a couple months and be like, I can't even think about this. Here is one of the first major delays that is one of the most dispiriting things that's happened to me in a long time. So the first summer, I had a very rough cut of parts 1, 2, and 3. Here's the thing, not anything close to a final product, but just an incredibly broad overview of like, here's all the shots.
Is this a year later, you're saying, or is this is not too long after?
This is like, I'm going to say it took 3 or 4 months after shooting.
Right.
So this is like tail end of 2017.
So like in the winter of that year.
Yeah, it's the winter of that year. I had this like rough compendium of, here's the thing, I think it's going to be, here's where I think the natural parts are, realizing immediately that part 2 had to be just a totally separate thing, pulling that, like I had all of this stuff. And to skip a huge amount of difficulty, I was using Dropbox for the project, and I'm syncing the project back and forth between different machines. And this is also the first major project that I'm doing in Final Cut. Again, this amount of data is absurd.
You've never handled, so many terabytes and of data and footage and even just pure time before, because you've never done something like this.
I'm way out of my depth. I'm totally out of my depth.
Again, just to provide a little bit more context for the discussion. So Gray takes a long road trip and is basically filming. You have like dash cams that are filming the entire driving period, as well as a bunch of clips that you're taking yourself of places that you're visiting, like you would normally see in a vlog, right? Like, here I am, and I'm looking at this thing, and that kind of stuff. But it was, I'm assuming the many tens of hours of multiple cameras shooting the road that caused a lot of the issues that we're talking about.
Yeah, and then plus, I had with me 4 different cameras that I was using to shoot other stuff. So my phone, I had a GoPro, and I had 2 other like pocket cameras. So in the depth of winter, a combination of factors occurred. There was an interaction between the way Dropbox works and the way Final Cut works and the way I had organized my files that caused about a third of the video in the rough cut of part 2 to be randomly swapped with the wrong clips. And so I ended up with a timeline where about every third clip was incorrect and from a different location across the trip. And I cannot tell you how dispiriting that was. There was no way to roll this back because of just like how large each of the individual backups were. Like there was no way to reverse it. And that right there, I don't think I touched part 2 for maybe 6 months, maybe 8 months after that, because it was so psychologically dispiriting. I couldn't even bring myself to open the project. I was like, I have to wait until I can really be like emotionally removed from how much labor has been completely destroyed by like a computer error. That's not even my fault. It wasn't even really the fault of any of the products I was using. It's just like, here's an super edge case that just happened, and sometimes life sucks. So
on a very basic level, do you know what happened?
Yeah, I would describe it as a namespace conflict.
Yeah, that's what I would assume. Like, because I know the way, I think Final Cut and Logic are similar in this way, that if you use them where they're pulling files from a location, you're not actually storing the files in the project itself.
Yeah.
If you change the name, it will just bring that in instead. And yeah, so it can be a bit of a nightmare.
Yeah, it's a little like That's the basic idea of it. It was a kind of namespace conflict, but it was a thing that was partly my fault for the way I was doing stuff. But this was also like, I had no experience with how do you even try to organize and catalog this much footage. There's also talking about technical difficulties. The live stream that went up, people will notice that if you look through the whole thing, at some points there's a rear view camera that you can see, and at some points there aren't. And that's because one of the technical problems I ran into during the filming was I did not have enough hard drive space to store all of the footage that I was capturing. And I was going through these really remote areas where there was just nowhere to buy a hard drive. Mm-hmm. And the technical error that I ran into, which was incredibly frustrating, is before I left the last major metropolitan area, I had gone into a store and I bought a bunch of hard drives, and half of them didn't work, but I didn't discover that until I was out in the desert. So there's a few places where footage is missing, and I had to make some strategic decisions about like, well, rear dash cam footage is just going to go, like, I'm just goodbye. Like, I'm not going to keep it. So there were so many technical problems over the course of this.
It was quite a mammoth undertaking, really. It's not surprising. Especially when you're not used to it. Like, you went from 0 to 1 million in terms of vlogging.
I did. And the thing is, I didn't have any idea what I was getting into.
No.
I had no concept of how much of a problem I was causing for myself. And yeah, I didn't have any idea of what was this going to look like in the end. I thought like, oh, let me just go and capture a bunch of stuff. Let this be a lesson in don't overshoot.
Yeah, you in this situation, you significantly bit off more than you could chew.
Yeah, it was a real disaster. Many a times I was wondering like, how do people deal with organizing and cataloging an enormous amount of footage? You know, and I was even looking around, and it's like everybody's got their own squirrely method seemed to be the answer that just works for them, and there's not really a good industry standard for you're going to have terabytes and terabytes of data. What are you going to manage it? It's like, well, at that point, every project is unique. And so you don't have a lot of general advice that you can try to follow.
This episode of Cortex is brought to you by Freshbooks, the company that can help you save time, hassle, and frustration with this super simple cloud accounting software. Freshbooks simplify tasks like invoicing, tracking expenses, and getting paid online. If you need to do any of these, if you work for yourself, if you ever send invoices to anyone, trust me, you want to use Freshbooks. Freshbooks have over 10 million customers that they help save 192 hours. Because their stuff is so simple to use. I have been using FreshBooks now for 5 years. Relay FM has used FreshBooks since day one. We're actually, probably by the end of this month, we're going to be sending our 2,000th invoice with FreshBooks. I cannot imagine the amount of time, hassle, and aggravation I would have spent over these last 5 years if I was using anything else. The fact that I never have to chase an invoice because I can see when somebody's received it and when they've printed it is amazing. The fact that all of the information that I need is saved and I can just select everything that I want from drop-down fields when I am setting up an invoice is amazing. I love all of these features of FreshBooks. I love that I can go in and get notifications to see what's changed since the last time I logged in, so I know what needs my attention. This is the stuff that you will be able to get yourself if you try out FreshBooks. If you're listening to this show, you ever send invoices, or you ever need to get paid online, or you ever track expenses, and you haven't yet used FreshBooks, please just give it a go. I know you're going to love it. They are offering an unrestricted 30-day free trial to listeners of Cortex, so you can go in, try it out, and make sure that it's right for you. You don't need to give them your credit card information or anything. They just want you to try it out and see how right it will be for you and your business. All you have to do is go to freshbooks.com/Cortex, and when they ask how you heard about them, say, from Cortex. So go to freshbooks.com/Cortex and get a 30-day free trial. Our thanks to FreshBooks for their continued support of this show and Relay FM.
But yeah, so there was, the better part of a year where I didn't even touch or think about the project because I was just too dispirited to even try to pick it up. Mm-hmm. But that's also partly why the original part 1 and part 2 were really delayed, because I had some technical problems with that one as well, but they were much more minor compared to part 2. Part 2 was the real disaster.
You were dealing with way less.
Yeah, I was dealing with much less. It was also a lot clearer, what is that? Whereas with the part 2 stuff, I'd shot so much footage. And like, I don't even know, like, what is this thing? I can't just show someone whatever it was, hundreds of hours of like, hey, let's go on a trip together. Like, it's horrifically boring to do that. So it's also trying to select the interesting parts.
Yeah, I mean, I know this probably, I kind of may feel a little bit dumb in saying it, but I'm just going to say it anyway. It kind of doesn't really feel like you have a vlog here. It's more like a short movie because you had to treat it differently. Because when you have so much stuff, you can't actually really make a 1 hour vlog. There has to be a story, otherwise it won't work, right? Like, you can't, typically you just couldn't make an hour version of parts 1 and 2 because they were very vloggy, right? Like, here I am today and I'm going, like, if this was an hour long of you just doing a little catalog of every single day, it would be too much. But instead there is like a story, there's foreshadowing, and like, there's a bunch of interesting things going on that make it something you can sit through and enjoy without like constantly checking how far along you are in the video, right? And so like, it is vlog style, but the work that you clearly went through to make it an entertaining hour is more like, I'm telling a different kind of story with this.
Yeah, I don't know.
I know you won't say it, like, so I'm saying it, but like, it is different, and you clearly decided to tell a story with it, because you set it up that way, right? Like, and I'm not saying that you set out to make your Oscar movie, but like, it has a slightly different feel to it than parts 1 and 3 do, which were more vloggy. Like, here is this day, here's what happened on this day, here is this day. Like, it's like it's chunked up that way. But this is like a much bigger story, and you set it up in the beginning and we follow it through, and there's lots of little things where it's like, oh God, he actually doesn't know how to manage a battery on a car, and everyone's terrified. I was watching it with Adina, and she was just like, oh, he keeps talking about the car being warm, that's going to kill the battery, and like when you're charging with a laptop, because everyone, we're following along with your range anxiety, and it's like when you set up, oh, I'm not going to go on the supercharger network, and then the next shot, oh, the car's so warm. It's like, no, you're ruining everything. So there, it had a different feel to it, and I think that's also probably what happens when you spend like a year working on it.
Yeah, it's funny to hear you describe it that way. Like, I just don't think about it in this way at all. I think this is entirely about mostly trying to select clips that also relate to other clips.
Right, but that's building like a narrative through line, right? Like, I know you're not. I understand that you didn't think of it in these terms, but you are more of a person who tells stories than you are a person who is used to vlogging, right? Like, you understand way more the beginning, middle, and an end of a video, because that's what all of your other videos are. Like, they have to start in a place and end in a place, and then you have to guide people through it, right? That is what you're used to doing. And it feels like you maybe applied a little bit more of that thinking to this video than some of the other vlogs, purely because of the fact that you were dealing with so much stuff. Like, it's kind of a little bit more like a typical video for you, where you're taking in a bunch of data sources and research and turning it into a thing. It feels like it might have been a little bit more like that process than some of the other stuff that you've done, which is more vlog-like.
Okay, well, it has a beginning and a middle and an end because it's a literal journey. There's a start point, there's a place I'm trying to go to, and then there's the end of it, which is now this is done.
Yep.
So I think that's the case, but I would love to know people who do this kind of stuff, what their workflow is, because it's so interesting. Like, after I had finally fixed all of the footage, I ended up having, God, I don't even know what it was. Many, many hours of just, here's the whole trip chronological from start to finish. Everything I shot that was not a road trip camera, not one of the dash cams. And a thing that I noticed working on all of the vlogs, but particularly this one, is like, oh, this is actually in some way the same way that I work on my regular videos, which is I'm just going to watch this through hundreds of times. And every time I go through, I'm going to try to take out the parts that are boring. And So that's why I think there are clips that relate to other clips, because each time you go through, you're like, oh yeah, I guess this one kind of connects to something that I say later, and so I'll leave these in. And over the past year, there were just a bunch of sections where I'm like, this doesn't matter. This doesn't connect to anything.
Mm-hmm.
It's a pointless side quest. Like, oh, it was interesting for me to do this particular thing, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't connect to anything. So I'll just take it out. But the thing that I do like much better working on a vlog than working on a script is, except for the couple shots of future me, which I thought I could stylistically allow to try to have some continuity, there's nothing else to add. Right? It's like, well, I've got the shots that I've got, and I've got the things that I've said, and there's no adding to this. And I don't know, there's something about that which is really it's really nice compared to trying to write a script for a regular video, because that process is like, oh, there's a world of things to include and it can go in any direction. And working on this was just a very different experience, because it's like, well, I just have these pieces, and there are a bunch of places where I'm, even in the final version, where I'm really annoyed that like I didn't make something clear at the time, or I didn't explain something very well. It's like, but I can't reshoot this stuff, so I just need to figure out a way in editing to either skip over it or to, make an interesting cut here. There is one little joke in the video which is 100% just a joke for me. I'm leaving it in there only because it makes me smile. And it's the shot where I start describing how I'm having a bunch of technical problems with like the cameras. And then I cut to future me yelling like, nobody cares about your technical problems. That doesn't really need to be in the video, but I'm leaving it in there because it makes me happy, because I cannot tell you how many dozens of hours of me complaining about like stuff isn't working, or like this hard drive's broken, or, oh man, Myke, that was the summer of USB-C, like how many USB-C dongle problems I had. And it's like, all of that is gone. Like, goodbye, all of this. It doesn't matter. Nobody cares. It's really boring. And so I feel like that's the process of like, I'm just going to go through this a bunch of times, and each time I'm going to try to take out whatever is the least interesting part of this, and hopefully what I'm left with is sort of interesting and has some kind of through line. So I'm very relieved to know that you liked it.
I really did. I was nervous when I saw the runtime.
Yeah.
It's like, whoa. But I was genuinely surprised how entertaining I found it. It was also funny to me. I also had some real visceral reactions to some points of this video.
Yeah.
Can you guess which part of the video caused the most major flashbacks for me?
You're horrified by the ghost town that I visited.
Yeah, well that's like one whole thing where, one, I can't believe that you went there.
Listeners, here's the thing. I went to this ghost town at the very end of the video, which even as we're talking right now, I'm still debating cutting that part. But
no, it's got to be in there. It's really good. It's terrifying.
I don't know. It feels like a bit of a side quest, but
worthy though.
Okay. So I went to this ghost town, but even when I was on the trip, I took some pictures specifically to send to Myke, because I thought, rifling through my mental Rolodex, I was like, who's going to be the most horrified by this? Myke. I have to send him pictures of this. I think you may be the only person I sent photos of that ghost town to, because they're like, Myke will be appalled. I've got to send him these photos.
I was really worried about you, and I cannot believe that you were walking into the buildings. I just cannot. It's like everything I know. I feel like I know about you. Like, why did you touch anything in the outhouse? I just can't fathom it. Like, it just makes no sense to me.
I mean, I did have to go to the bathroom,
but like walking into those houses, and like you sent me pictures of the underground death bunker, which that surely was. Right, you were sending me pictures of it. I remember all of this. You would, anytime you came across any abandoned building on that trip, you would send me a picture of it, I think. But the thing that I have the most visceral feelings towards is when you said, "Oh, I have some Wi-Fi, so I'm going to download some work files."
Oh, of course. Of course. Yes.
I remember greatly that week.
Why did you have such a visceral reaction to that, Myke?
Because we had recorded a very timely episode of our show, the WWDC episode. It's very timely because every day after that it is not released, it is getting older and older. And my co-host was in the West. Like, I don't know where he is. He's just missing. Sometimes he's like, oh, I have no reception. Like, I can't even send you text messages. And I'm waiting for you to download a multiple gigabyte project, listen to it all. And again, it was funny to me. You're listening to it in the car, which I remember you telling me you were going to do that. So it's just funny because I can imagine it's just a laptop strapped into the car playing the show.
That whole trip, I had a laptop, with the seatbelt around it, so it's snugly secure, doing various things, either trying to like offload footage or play the podcast or do a whole bunch of stuff. But I had a laptop as a co-pilot that whole trip.
But I just remember the logistical nightmare that was caused by you being on that trip of us trying to get the episode out.
This is one of the things that I was kind of frustrated afterwards because I never had any shots of me explaining it clearly or really talking about it. And I think particularly, let's say for European viewers, there's no concept of how many stretches in America you can go on where you have no connection, no cell phone connection, let alone an internet connection. And like, I wish I had some spots where that was just made more clear to the viewer, that for huge portions of this trip, it's like, well, if I broke down on the side of the road, the answer is, well, I'm just gonna have to wait for someone. There's nothing else to do. And that's not even some of the most remote areas I've ever been in America. I remember when we recorded that episode, I was trying to prepare you for, because I think we recorded the Cortex episode on like the second to last day of WWDC, and I went on this trip before you had finished editing it, and I was telling you like, well, listen, I hope I'm going to be able to download this episode somewhere, but I can't guarantee. And I just happened to find this one casino that I stopped at that had decent enough Wi-Fi that I could stay there for several hours and the files downloaded to be able to listen to it. And then I still think I didn't have internet for like another day to get back to you with the results or anything. It was a long time.
Yeah, well, I mean, so I have memories of like being in my kitchen. This is before we moved. Like, so this is like in my family home. You would send me a picture and be like, "This is where I am. Still can't get it." And I have memories of me being like,
It's funny to hear this, Myke, because all of your anxiety had completely slipped out of my mind a lot. Like, I'd forgotten all of this. And to me, the entirety of that time was just reduced now to this one funny clip that I had of me listening to the show while we're in the car. Oh, I was going to say, here's the thing. I don't know if most viewers will ever notice this kind of thing, but this is one advantage of living the non-linear life, is by having the parts 1 and 3 and then part 2 be very separated in time from their production. I don't think anyone will notice, but the clip that I am listening to of the podcast in the car, I intentionally made that the clip that I play of us in part 1 recording the show.
Ooh, continuity.
I don't think people ever pick up on that stuff, but I love to try to do that if I can. I had this one clip where you could hear the podcast in the background. And so when I was doing part 1, I was like, I have to use this clip because this clip is going to be the one that shows up in part 2.
That's an Easter egg.
Yeah, it totally is an Easter egg. And it is like, I don't recommend that people do vlogs over, like, I don't recommend the nonlinear life because you start going crazy. But this is one fun thing that you can do in editing is have a connection like that otherwise would be impossible. Because if I was just doing part 1 and I pick some clip of us on the podcast, I'm not going to happen to have that same clip in part 2.
Yes. It had to go the other way around.
Yeah. I have to already know that I'm working on part 2 to be able to go back to part 1 to put it in there. So anyway, it's just a little touch, a little Easter egg for the really intense viewers.
So this did look like a really amazing trip. Like, I feel like at the time, I didn't really understand why you were doing this, but seeing it like this, I understand why you did it, because it looked like a beautiful and kind of incredible thing to witness, like all of these different landscapes and stuff. Maybe don't vlog it next time.
Myke, do you know why I thought, let me experiment with vlogs on my YouTube channel? With many things. I have a couple reasons. One of the reasons is I like to be able to do things on my channel that are different, even though it always makes people angry. And you get like, unsubscribe. I didn't sign up for this. It's like, okay. But I thought, vlogs, this'll be fun and easy.
It's got to be easier than an animated video, surely. Right? Surely.
In fairness, because of the thing that I talked about earlier with the nature of filming, I actually do think it's easier. I would regard the vlogs as easier to make. This happened to be like a tremendous mammoth like I ran into these things, but a lot of this was like one-time errors and like I didn't know what the hell I was doing. But the actual process of editing and making a video, like I can just do that in the afternoon and sit down for a few hours in a more relaxed way, in a way that I simply cannot do while writing a script. So I will say that it's easier, but it has not been quick. And each one of these things I ended up just making it much more involved than it needed to be. I've ended up overshooting on all of these things. And this is that vlog that I did on attention on my second channel. That was shot as me walking in the woods, specifically as a reaction to the nightmare of all of the other projects that I did, where I was like, okay, listen, you want to say a thing. This is the perfect thing that you would want to say in a vlog. And then I set myself the creative restraint, like, you can do nothing but walk in the woods. Because if you start thinking about all of the interesting things that you could do with this project, it will become another summer of gray. Like, don't, right? Like, you have to.
You will have been off the internet for 3 years before you even tell people.
I know. And so another behind the scenes thing that I don't know what the reaction is going to be to this vlog. I don't expect these things to be remotely as popular as the main videos on the channel. Like, that's not their purpose.
They don't have the real ability to go viral, right?
Yeah,
to be shared. It is more like you have to already be interested to be interested.
Yeah, I think of like expanding circles of audience attention. And, you know, if you look at some of my videos that have a lot of views on it, I'm always aware, like, many of those views come from people who don't even conceptualize that there is a channel that produces these things.
Sure,
they're just like watching random videos. And so then you orbit in to like, oh, there's people who know that the CGP Grey channel is a thing and like videos from it. And then then like a subset of that are the people who like want notifications. And then you drill down into like, oh, the people who are listening to this podcast right now and also like you have these various levels of intensity. And I actually kind of think that the people listening to Cortex right now are at the like interest level of, you might like this vlog, but is not remotely meant for the further orbits of this thing. I just wanted to mention something that I think is useful for just to be aware of for anybody who's working on a project and trying to make something. Like when I first uploaded my UK Explained video to the YouTube channel, that thing, you know, by the standards of the time, is a pretty well polished YouTube video. And I always want to emphasize that people don't see the like practice that went into making something like that, which was being a teacher and giving talks in front of people multiple times every day and getting a sense for how do you make something that's interesting. Like that doesn't just pop out of nowhere. And so like, if you're trying to make something, you should totally expect that your first few attempts are not going to be great. Like they're not going to be good at all. And it can be dispiriting to look at something like that sort of pops out of existence and think, oh, this thing just started good. It's like, yeah, but there's a lot you're not seeing. And if you watch the vlogs and you think, oh, these are pretty good as far as vlog goes, like I hope people like them. But if you think that, I'm going to let you in on a little secret. So because of the massive amount of time that we're talking about here between, for all of the vlogs, when they were shot and when they went up. I think the Las Vegas one, the very first one I did, is also very close to a year between the filming of that and the actual upload of it. I have, at this point now, shot and edited something close to like a dozen vlogs. And almost all of them I've just decided like they're no good or they're boring and the whole thing has been scrapped. So this is, again, like I've been practicing in a way that doesn't necessarily seem obvious to the viewer.
Because you can't so easily practice in public anymore.
Yeah, I can't easily practice in public anymore. And I have to make a judgment call about what is going to go up on the channel and what's not going to go up on the channel. And, you know, when I did that first vlog, I'd already mentioned that prior to that point, I'd already shot and edited a bunch of stuff, and I just thought it was garbage and it was boring. And like, sometimes you can see little like remnants of these. Like in my shots of Final Cut Pro, there's like these dead vlogs past that are sometimes visible in some of those shots. But I just think it's useful for someone to be aware of that. And one of the reasons why did I stick with this ridiculous project? And also, why did I name the first one parts 1 and 3? Is because I thought I could make something really interesting out of this. And I really did want to kind of put myself on the hook for like, I know I'm really dispirited with the shape that this project is in, but I don't want to forget this one. Like, I think this one is more interesting than most of the stuff that I've shot in the past. Mm-hmm. So like, I've been practicing a bunch with other stuff, but I swear to God though, if I continue doing vlogs on the channel, that I can't make them as interesting as this. Like, I swear, I want to upload something that's much more of a boring vlog. And that attention video, I wanted to put it on the main channel specifically because it was kind of boring. And it was only because it'd been such a long time since I'd uploaded a real video. I didn't put it there because I thought people would just freak out too much. So I shunted it off to the second channel, but like, I've got to put something that's genuinely less of an enormous vlog project up on the channel at some point, just so I feel like I can. But yeah, my long nightmare is very, very soon to be completed and done, and it'll be up. And then I hope people like it. I'm pleased with what I got in the end, and I'll be curious to see how it goes with everyone.
I'm looking forward to 2018's vlog.
Oh yeah?
Mm-hmm. Can't wait. Any day now, right? No, wait. Next year.
Well, I mean, I do have a giant.
I know you do.
I do have a giant.
I know you do. I watched you. I saw you doing it.
You know, God damn you, Myke. You make me so angry. Because I've got that one. And I was so close to scrapping it, and I thought, oh, I think I might have an interesting creative constraint to make this much more possible. Uh-huh. But yeah, no, this is the horrible burden of the nonlinear life. It's like, oh great, I'm done with 2017. Now I can catch up to 2018 that summer.
This episode of Cortex is brought to you by ExpressVPN. Look, we all think that we're immune to cybercrime. It is so hard to imagine someone trying to get hold of your information. But the bad news is stealing data from people like you and me using public Wi-Fi is a super easy way for bad guys to make money. If you're leaving your internet connection unencrypted, your passwords and credit card numbers could be vulnerable. But there's something that you can do to protect yourself from cybercriminals, and that is to use ExpressVPN. It works by securing and anonymizing your internet browsing, encrypting your data, and hiding your public IP address with easy-to-use apps that run seamlessly in the background of your device. You can turn on ExpressVPN protection with just a click, and you're free to safely surf on public Wi-Fi without being snooped on or having your personal data stolen. This is something that you can use on your Mac, your PC, your iPhone, your iPad. They have apps for all of them. ExpressVPN is rated the #1 VPN service by TechRadar and comes with a 30-day money-back guarantee. I use ExpressVPN whenever I travel, when I'm connected to Wi-Fi networks, public Wi-Fi networks, and I always turn it on, so I just have that peace of mind. But it's also super useful when I sometimes come across geolocated content. And this is a big thing that's been happening recently, where just I want to read an article, but I can't because I'm in the European Union. With ExpressVPN, I can say, hey, I'm somewhere else, and then I can read it. That's actually a really great use of ExpressVPN, as well as the protection stuff. For less than $7 a month, you can get the same protection with ExpressVPN that I have. If you ever use public Wi-Fi and you want to keep the bad guys away from your data, you need ExpressVPN. So go to expressvpn.com/Cortex to learn more and protect your online activity today. Find out how you can get 3 months for free at expressvpn.com/Cortex. That is expressvpn.com/Cortex for 3 months free with a 1-year package. Our thanks to ExpressVPN for their support of this show and Relay FM. So, Gray, on our last episode, it was an Ask Cortex episode. And Ask Cortex episodes, because they are full of so many things, they tend to generate a lot of different discussions. There are always, with these types of episodes, at least one thing that I hear about a lot after the episode. Can you guess, of the things that we spoke about last episode, the thing that people spoke about most? Could it have been our hate of lunch? Right? What do you think it was?
Well, I mean, who could disagree that lunch is the worst? No one.
I was honestly thinking it would be this, was not this. We definitely had some people say that lunch is great, but there were lots of people that don't like it, and there were lots of people that were mostly ambivalent to our hate for food. But
yeah, here's the thing. After having done this for years now, I know there is no point in even trying to guess what is the thing that people latch onto, because it's random. Like it's the random capricious interests of the internet. And so I have no idea. What did people latch onto from last time?
What day does the week begin on?
Monday is the correct answer, Mike. I don't understand how there could be any discussion about
But great. Did you not know that the weekend is because they're at different ends of the week, like a rope? It has 2 ends. Did you not know that? It's like a bookend, Gray. Did you not know this? I have no time for this argument.
That's stupid.
This is the argument that has been thrown at me a lot over the last couple of weeks, that the reason it's called the week ends is because there's 2 ends to the week. And it's like, okay, we're not having an etymology discussion here. We're not talking about where the word came from, right? Nobody thinks of this. When you say to somebody, how was your weekend? Like, do you only care about Saturday? Do you not care what happened on Sunday because Sunday was the beginning of the... Like, no one. Nobody thinks of the weekend as 2 separate days on either side of the week. Like, that's not... This is not how we do it. Like, you're not like, oh, Saturday, that's the end of the week. Sunday, beginning of the new week. This is the first bookend. No one thinks this way. You can tell me a million times why the weekend is like a bookend. Sure, fine. That makes some sense, but that's not how people live. Nobody lives that way.
This is a kind of, I'm sure there's a term for this, but it's a sort of backwards reasoning from the way things are to why it makes sense that they are this way. Right? Of like, oh, they're like bookends. I think there are many things in the world that are like this. Cough, the entire education system, cough. Of like, oh, it is this way, and now we can reason our way into why it should be this way and why this way is great. But if we could somehow live in a parallel universe where the order of our society was still the same, but nobody had ever thought of calendars, that people would think, well, there's 5 days where I work, and then there's 2 days where I don't, and then it's 5 days where I work again, and 2 days when I don't, and this is the pattern of life. That if they were like, how could we represent this on paper? And you're just starting from fresh. You never thought of it before. I don't think anybody's natural inclination would be to divide up the weekend and put it on either side of the page.
It's like, oh, that makes perfect sense. That's what
no one would do that. And everyone who had saw that for the first time, without ever having conceived of a calendar, would immediately say, that's dumb. Why did you split up my time off? Right?
Yep. Because Cortexans are wonderful people.
Right.
I have seen something that I've enjoyed a lot, which is people decided, like they go into their calendar app when they hear about this. There's lots of people I've seen that have decided to finally throw off the shackles of Sunday and have moved to Monday as the one true day to begin the week on. I've been enjoying that. Lots of people are like, I never thought about this before, but now I can do it. But then you've got the wonderful fringe Cortexans who decide, I'm going to set it as Wednesday. because I can, and I want to see what happens. And I can only applaud those people because why not, right? Like, there's an option. Let's just see what happens. So there are a lot of people out there, Gray, now that are deciding to just start their week on a random day in their calendar and just see what effect it has. And I have a lot of respect for that. I could never do it, but I respect it.
I mean, look, we need pioneers to try different things. They'll settle on Monday as the correct day, but still,
it's the only day.
It doesn't hurt to try. I do have a lot of sympathy for the Americans who are going to still be living in a world where all the calendars start on Sunday. Mm-hmm. That's why I could never make the transition fully until I moved to the UK. I remember trying in college the Monday calendar, and it would too often cause problems where you have to look at somebody else's calendar.
Yeah, I get it, right? But like, throw off those shackles. And at the same time, if you have some kind of abnormal work schedule where like your weekend is like Thursday and Friday, and go crazy. Like set your first day as Saturday, like just go for it. But if you have a traditional work schedule of 5 days of work and 2 days off, not 1 day off, 5 days of work, 1 day off, because nobody lives that way, then Monday is the only day.
Yeah, but the problem as always is communications with other humans. It makes me think, there's a science fiction author I quite like, Greg Egan, and in one of his books, there's just like passing reference to people have a piece of software that acts as a translator between them and the outside world, and that you can set parameters exactly like this, where you can say like, look, for me, the days start on Monday. And so when anyone is talking to you, even if they start the week on Sunday, like you perceive it in a Monday time reference.
This sounds like the only thing I really want in my life now.
Yeah, exactly. Like I think of that a bunch. Like, I don't really need the whole world to change its standards. I just need to only perceive the standards in Gray standard way.
Oh God, can you imagine how beautiful that'd be? Like, all of the little things that annoy me would go away.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be wonderful?
It comes up as like two characters decide they like a name for a thing better this other way, and they're like, we agree that in our filter, we're going to set it this way. And so forever onward, we're always going to hear like this thing that the rest of the world calls X, we're going to hear it as Y. Like, oh, I
love that.
I think about that a bunch.
So I feel like all my training has paid off when it comes to this show.
Oh yeah, Grasshopper?
Thank you, Sensei. I've been able to apply the things that I have learned here in direct one-on-one training with my wife about being productive and setting up systems. So my wife, Adina, is currently on a semi-indefinite sabbatical from her job in advertising. Mm-hmm. And she's going to be taking some time to work on personal projects, and we're going to be doing some stuff together, and there's like a lot of things that she's working on, and she's got a lot of stuff that she wants to achieve, so she's taking some time to do that. But both me and you know, and anybody that's self-employed will definitely come to face at some point, is typically about 2 to 3 days into it, you realize, hang on a second, I can do whatever I want. And that's a problem, because what happens when you realize you can do whatever you want is you don't know what to do.
Yeah.
What to prioritize. You have no structure around you because nobody is telling you what to do anymore. Now, many people approach these types of things differently. For me, I built a schedule. Mm-hmm. That is what I needed, right? It is way more useful for me to know that I will do this show on this day and this show on this day, and I have it built out. And that is what keeps me motivated and moving along. And it's not like this for everyone. It's not like this for you, right? That is not a thing that works for you. Yeah.
But you have a real schedule train. Like that, that train does a lot of work in keeping Myke chugging along.
Yeah, there are things that happen on a certain day at a certain time, and they have to be released at a certain day and a certain time, so that means tasks need to occur before, right? Like, I can't prepare for Upgrade on Tuesday because Upgrade records on Monday, so I have to prepare for Upgrade on Monday morning, right? So, like, my week, and again, like, there are times when I hate it. Like, I get in these periods of time where I'm like, I hate that I live my life this way. But, like, that doesn't bother me because this is normal, right? You eventually will rebel and maybe shake things up a bit and reshape it. But that, I know I need that. Like, for me to be able to do my work effectively and to ensure that I do all of the things that I need to do, I need to have some kind of inbuilt schedule into my time. It's just, it keeps me going. But that was what works for me. For you, I think, if I can speak for you, it's much more your to-do system guides you, more because you set your own deadlines when you need them and you set them out the way that you want to. But putting big chunks of time into your diary on a consistent basis can restrict your creativity a little bit. So you're a bit more free flowing with that.
Yeah, I think this is genuinely a big and interesting difference between the two of us. And I do just want to say, like, just to put a little side note here, because I often talk to people and like they're interested in the idea of being self-employed, and I really think it is important to realize, like, this is not for everyone, and this is an aspect of the job that is really hard to understand until you're in it. You need to create your own constraints. And I know people who have become self-employed and left because they realize it's a total nightmare that doesn't work for their personality, and they're hugely depressed, and it's such a strange thing to talk about, and it can be really hard to talk about because for me it is the best part of being self-employed.
Yes.
And particularly the kind of self-employed that I do, which is I want to be self-employed and I also want to try to have as few deadlines as possible. But it is also simultaneously one of the hardest parts of the job, and the part of the job that even talking about it now, I'm hesitant to talk about because people have no sympathy in hearing about it. They're like, oh, your lack of constraints is difficult. Oh, boo-hoo, like cry me a river, play your violin a little bit more. But it really is the truth. Like it's a hard thing to be able to manage in a way that works. And it's one of the reasons why, like, you and I like to talk about work a lot, because it's helpful to reinforce some of the ideas that are important. And one of those ideas for me that I've definitely learned over the years is that deadlines are anti-productive. That I know that when I have real deadlines, like real external constraint deadlines, that is often when I will procrastinate. And it's like, I'm not a procrastinator kind of person, but deadlines make me procrastinate, which is the opposite of what it is for most people. And so that's why I try to arrange my work in this way.
So when people think about being self-employed, one of the things that people talk about, which is one of the perceived joys and is one of the joys if you can do this, you're happy with this, is I get to be my own boss, right?
Yeah.
But here's the thing. You have to be your own boss.
Yeah. Think about that sentence really deep for a minute.
Yes. Think about it from the other side.
Right.
Not the idea of freedom. Think about it as you are the person who must ensure the work is done.
Yeah. I have to whip my own back.
Yes. That's an interesting way to put it, but yes, that is exactly it. Somebody has to make sure it's done, and that becomes you. So going back to why we were talking about this, like, Adina has always been a person who writes huge to-do lists, just massive to-do lists. And this was fine before because she would just have this list of things that she wanted to do and she would knock them off when she needed to. But then, like, one of the reasons that she decided to go down this path is because those lists were just getting longer and longer, and it felt like she wasn't able to actually accomplish the things she wanted to accomplish in her life. So now she is the master of her own destiny. The lists started getting bigger because now there's all these things, and it was starting to get out of hand. So there were just these massive lists on pieces of paper that were turning into Post-it notes and index cards. And they were just kept growing. The paper continued to grow.
Right. Okay.
So it was we sat down and I said, it is time for a system. So she was doing a good job of taking a bunch of index cards and writing her tasks on the index cards and like drawing them together. It's like, well, these are all one thing and these are all another thing. And as I was saying to her, I was like, that's really great. But those index cards, that's not going to help you, in my opinion. Index cards are a great way to like get everything down if that's what you want to do. But that is, in my opinion, not an ongoing system because you can't carry those index cards around with you. It's once you've written, if you filled an index card with a bunch of tasks, how do you add more to it? So it needed to go into an app because that's where I believe this. I am a pen and paper guy, But I believe that these types of things should be going into a digital system because of its flexibility and its portability. It can be with you all the time, and you can do a million different things with it, and things can exist in different places. You can move them around, you can tag them, you can put them into projects. Like, it's much more malleable.
Yeah. Index cards are great for a kind of brainstorming.
Yes.
I've done that a bunch where it's like, I'm feeling anxious. What am I working on? Let me write down stuff. You can move it around on the table. Oh, all these things kind of go together. You know, I completely agree. That is great for thinking and anxiety reduction. But I'm with you 100% that ultimately you have to have some kind of system that it all goes into where it becomes actionable items.
Yes. So we were looking at the slate of to-do apps that were available, and we chose Things for Adina.
Good choice.
It is the app that I would like to be able to use. There are a bunch of things about that app that work great, but there's some stuff that doesn't work so great for me. So like some of the support that it has for repeating tasks has been weird and continues to be weird. Like, for example, if you have a repeating task and it repeats every Wednesday, you can't complete the task until Wednesday. That does not work for me, because that's not how I work. Sometimes I like to do things sooner than they should be done. My understanding is they are trying to fix this. This feels like with most to-do apps, if they've been around for long enough, you can tell that there are some just they made some decisions, right? Like, we have this a lot with OmniFocus, right? The company made decisions 10 years ago, but now they're going to start to be a problem. Right, and like, this is like the time zone thing. Has that been fixed yet? Do you need to?
I wasn't going to bring it up, Myke. I wasn't going to bring it up.
So, but stuff like that.
I wasn't going to bring it up, especially because the summer is coming up.
Oh God. Oh, I feel for you. I'll be fine when I land and Todoist tells me, "Would you want to change time zone?" And I say yes, Todoist, and it's done. So like, I'll enjoy that.
Yeah, you enjoy your little smug moment in the sunshine.
Oh, I will. I think about you every time. Every time I land, I think about you as I press the button when Todoist helpfully asks me if I want to change to the local time zone.
Fuck you, Myke.
Yes, I know. Things is brilliant. One of the reasons I like it, and I use it because I use Things for my Cortex to-do list. Like, I have a little shortcut that I run. It's because within a project, you can put in these headings. And there is a way to do this in Todoist, but it does not work with the way that my brain works because it just looks like a task. But in Things, it is laid out. They look like headings, and it's much more visual in a way that I enjoy.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I don't need it. I would like it, but I don't need it, which is why I don't feel the requirement to do it the way that Todoist does it. But I like the way that it works in Things. Plus, just from a visual perspective, Things is my favorite of all of the to-do apps. It is beautiful. It is designed very well, and a lot of the interactions are really nice with it. So
yeah, I'll back you up 100% on that. Things is the best looking to-do app by far.
I think, honestly, it's the only good-looking one. It's not just the best one. I think it's the only good-looking one. And it's because this stuff is really difficult to do. I mean, like, they're perfectly fine, but the design of them does not excite me in any way.
Yeah, Things has a nice feel to it. And I bust it out every once in a while. I actually have been using it the past couple weeks because I've been particularly busy. And as I meant, like, sometimes it's nice to have, like, here's a separate list of like the absolute has to happen stuff that I just want separate, like, so it's easier to think about. Like, here's 5 things, and that's it. Like, I don't want to open up the major stuff. Like, I can let everything just fall by the wayside. I do that. Mike's laughing because he knows what's going on.
No, it's like we're terrible people though in that way of like, I have to have something's going on right now. I can't even use my regular to-do app. I need a whole new to-do app. It's the only way I can function right now is I need a whole separate list for my usual list. But I do it too.
Yeah. I know this sounds ridiculous to people, but you do run into these situations where it's like, look, there's mission critical stuff that has to happen, and literally everything else in my life can fall by the wayside, and I will just reap the consequences later.
This is one of the great uses of pen and paper when it comes to to-do lists, by the way.
Yeah,
if you
agree.
Look at your reminders list, your things list, your OmniFocus list, and you're like, there's too much here. If you sit down and like you write down what are actually the most important things from that list, it can really help you understand what you actually need to do.
Yeah.
And so really all we're doing is, for the same reason that I put all of my stuff into a digital system, I'm using a separate digital system for things that are like, I don't want this to clutter everything else.
That's why like I do really like things, and it's the reason why I use it every once in a while in that situation, because it's beautiful looking, which is de-stressing. OmniFocus, it is the most powerful, but I always think it suffers from what I'm coining as like redundant RIS syndrome, which stands for redundant information syndrome, where it's like you look at a list and it'll tell you in two places on the same screen what project it is, or like it'll show you all the tags. Like I don't really need to see all this stuff. And sometimes it can feel a little overwhelming. So like things is really nice. And I would say for anybody out there who still is looking for a to-do system, probably things would be my default recommendation if I don't know anything about you. If like you just need to pick something, go with things. It looks nice. It's easy to use. It's obvious what everything is for, and you will know soon enough if you need something more powerful like OmniFocus. Like you'll discover that on your own, that there are limitations there. But I'm also with you. I thought it was dumb at first, Thing's ability to have headers, but I think that is like a unique defining feature of that app, which I find myself missing everywhere else. The way Things lets you separate tasks in this non-actionable way to just group them. It's a killer feature of that app.
It has this wonderful interaction that I saw Adina do, and I'm like, what did you just do? So the app has a little plus button in a circle, right? Like, and you tap that plus button to add a new task, right? I think all to-do apps have something that's like this, right? You're in any view, you can tap it, or you can like tap and hold it and create a project or whatever. But if you're looking at a list of tasks, you can tap and drag that button anywhere you want, and it will create a task wherever you let go.
I mean, so you can like drag it onto a project and then it creates a new task in that project?
Or where in a list. So if you have like a list of 10 things, you want to put something in the middle because that's just where you want it, you just drag it there and it just pops the new task thing open, and that's where it saves it. It's like, oh, I like that, right? Like it just looked good.
Let's see, that's interesting. That is a great new user just getting used to something feature. Like just drag it where you want it, as opposed to, like if you find you need something more complicated. I have a whole bunch of shortcuts that are my like, where do things need to go? So I run the shortcuts app, which then like takes my input and then properly formats it and sticks it exactly where it needs to go in OmniFocus. It was like, but that is an impossible sell to anyone who's starting something.
But one of the most valuable parts of the whole thing was like the moment before the data entry, right? Because she has to get all the index cards out, and then the data entry needs to begin. And before, I was kind of like trying to help her through this process, right? Because I've been through it, and there is probably nothing I think about more than these things, right? Hence why we are here every few weeks. It was at this point where she needed to look at everything, work out what was actually worth keeping, and then the categorizations. So it was like really good because I got to see everything, and we got to like debate it all. Like she had two separate columns. One was like important admin and not important admin. I was like, well, no, that's admin, right? Like the importance is created through due dates, right? So like we got to talk through that kind of stuff. Like if something's important, put a date on it. If it's not important, just leave it in the admin project, and you can just get to it when you want it. And we got to look at like, let's build a system of projects and tasks and tags and how is that going to work for you? And like, Things is good for that kind of stuff. So she has a bunch of projects now, and she's starting to tag some of them because in looking at some of this stuff before, I didn't like the contexts idea, of like, well, if I don't want to deal with phone stuff right now, then I want to do that. So it's like, well, things doesn't have context as such, but you could put tags to things, and then you can search the tags and that kind of stuff. So like finding a way to have all of the tasks and categorize them, but also have some like cross-categorization of stuff. And it seems to have helped her a lot so far. She has everything where she needs it to be, and has been able to... What I'd really like to see is like, I think we're into like the 4th week now. This is the week where she was clearly able to start tackling a lot of the creative projects that she wanted to work on, where previously she was just getting like lost in the admin. And the other thing, though, the thing I am more proud of than anything else, she's time tracking.
Oh, wow.
Yep.
Wow, she's like an advanced student doing that so early.
Well,
usually that's the kind of thing you have to pitch to someone when their self-employment is falling apart. You're like, listen, let me tell you something. You have no idea how you're spending your time. You think you do.
this was exactly
You
it.
usually have to wait until someone's at the nadir to be able to convince them to do that. So
The problem that
great.
she has here is that she lives with me. So I kept talking about it to her. And I said to her, because I genuinely believe, I said, everything we have done here with things is useless unless you know how you're spending your time.
Yeah.
It is useless. Because once it started, she was having some problems of like, all right, she wanted Monday to be her admin day. But it wasn't working. Things were coming up.
Right.
I was like, well, there you go, right? Like, you didn't do any admin on Monday, but you did something. What was it?
What did you do? What was it?
And she didn't know. So I was like, well, let's start time tracking, shall we? So she's been doing that now. And I recommend that people do this. Like if you have projects in your to-do system, make them projects or tags in your time tracking system, right? So like, if you have, like I have like sponsor stuff and show stuff and I can link them together. So it makes sense to me as an overarching system. And so, like, and again, it's like, I really believe it's important to do this at the beginning because even though it's a big thing to do, if you do it at the beginning, you have a real understanding of how you're spending your time and what is taking you the time that it actually takes. Like if you think to yourself, oh, admin takes me all day, but it actually takes you like 2 hours on a Wednesday, then fine. And it's like I was saying to her, of like, well, if you want to do it on Monday, but it's not happening on Monday, maybe it is a better day to do admin tasks. Maybe Monday is a day where you want to do different types of things. So just live your life and track it, and then we can make decisions based on that. And so I feel very happy that I've been able to put my accumulated knowledge into all of this. And I'm pleased because it's nice to see that the stuff that we talk about is actually making a difference to someone like who I can see it making a difference to. Right, like that is like a really valuable thing for me because this is stuff that I wholeheartedly believe in, but I'm actually seeing it work in front of me, which is kind of wonderful.
Yeah, it's the really important meta work that helps the main work happen, and you have to get it right. And it's it's really helpful to have someone else walk you through it or kind of guide you through it at the beginning stages like that. So I feel it does sound like you really put her on a great starting track because
she did the Cortex instructional course, the intense course that I've created. You only have to marry me to get it. That's the price. It's very limited in its scope, this project.
I mean, I was gonna say that sounds like potential for Cortex brand, but if you have to marry Myke, that's a little too much.
Let's walk that one back for a bit. Let's put a pin in that one for now.
But that's really good, and I'm glad to hear that it's going well. And I really do mean it because like very often, I think a lot of people come to this stuff just like when they're at a bad time in their life. I always think. For me as well, it was when I was doing the teacher training and recognized immediately, like I was overwhelmed and disorganized and I was going to fail in a way that I just never had before if I didn't start figuring out how to get my life together. So it's much better to have this kind of stuff right at the start than to have to wait for your dark period and then go searching for how, time tracking. What is this thing that I've heard rumors of?
I guess she's just lucky that her husband cannot stop thinking about these things.
This episode of Cortex is brought to you by Hover. You know who needs a domain name? You do. Whether there's a side project that you have on your mind, or maybe you've recently taken an extended sabbatical from work and so side projects can become main projects, or if you just have a hobby that you like, a domain name is your place on the internet. I think everyone with any kind of internet presence should have their own domain name, and Hover is the company I have been using for I don't even know how long now at this point to register all of my domain names. They have over 400 different domain name extensions for you to choose from. And if you're looking for a domain name for yourself, there's an interesting option, which is the .me extension. It's good to have your actual name as a domain name, so .me seems like a good option. If you don't have your name yet, well, Hover does have .me domains on for sale this month, only at Hover for $9.99. $9.99. Head on over to Hover. I can't recommend them anymore. Simple, fast, easy domain name registration. And when you go there, go to hover.com/Cortex. That's hover.com/Cortex. Grab a .me domain for $9.99. Or if you're new to Hover, get an additional 10% off any domain extension for your first year. That's hover.com/Cortex. Thanks so much to Hover for supporting the show and all of Relay FM.
But let me tell you, though, I've learned some stuff about myself over the last month that I didn't know before.
Yeah?
So now that Adina is at home, I am very self-conscious of working on the sofa.
Oh God, of course. Yes, this is a big physical change.
Because it's for a few things. One, I feel like it looks like I am just being lazy if I am laying on the sofa, no matter what it is that I'm doing. And as well, because of the nature of my work, a lot of the stuff that I am doing from the outside can look like I am merely just watching YouTube videos and reading websites. But like a lot of the time, not all of the time, there is obviously an amount of slacking off. But a lot of the time, I'm researching things, right? But when it's stuff that you are so interested in because you enjoy them, it also just looks like you're being lazy.
I have an amazing example for this in my own life where I have a great deal of sympathy for my wife, which is when I am doing edits of podcasts, I'm almost always playing a video game at the same time. So I'm listening to the podcast and I'm playing a game. And part of that is this trick that I've learned from myself that if I just watch the podcast, I will actually over edit it. Like I'll spend way more time than is really necessary making little changes or doing like it doesn't. I'll make 1,000 changes that don't matter, and so playing the game helps give that little, just the tiny bit of friction of, do I want to alt tab out of this to change that, or is it okay to just let it slide? But from the outside perspective, how does one tell if a partner is just playing video games or playing video games and also listening intently to a podcast? It's very hard to tell.
It's very hard to tell. Well, it's like the other thing is, how do you tell if the podcast that they're listening to is just something that they're listening to enjoy, or are they actually listening because it's something they need to listen to for their work?
Yes, that would be an even harder situation if you had someone who had to do that. It's
Oh, by the way, my recent thing is, you remember I used to do coloring? I used to like color a lot, and it's like I always continue to while we record.
I was going to say, have you stopped coloring?
Yeah, I haven't been doing the coloring for a while.
I always like to think of you coloring as we're chatting, but I guess not.
This is but this is what I said. One thing that I do a lot, and I continue to do it while we record, is I doodle. So I have a bunch of pens in front of me, and I just sit and doodle while we record. But one thing that I've been getting into now, especially when editing, if I'm editing a project like Cortex, where it's very involved and lots of hours, I've been doodling in Procreate on my iPad.
Oh, interesting.
Procreate is incredible.
Yeah, it's a hell of a program.
It is not as complicated to learn as I thought it would be. Because I've, played with a lot of these types of applications. Like, for example, I cannot, for the life of me, fathom how to use applications like Illustrator.
Oh, yeah. I've made several runs at Illustrator and always give up.
Or any vector graphic stuff, my brain cannot fathom how to make shapes in vector formats, right? With the little anchors and the things and the points.
Bezier curves? No, Mike, there's nothing wrong with Bezier curves.
Can't do it. Like I just can't understand it. It doesn't matter how much I try.
Infinite resolution. It's so nice.
I hate it. But Procreate has been wonderful, and I've just been like working on little like doodles and drawings and just like, it's nothing, but it's something for me, and I really love doing it. But like, I'm not sitting and drawing mugs or like vases and stuff. Like, it's not drawings. Like, I don't really know how to describe them. Like, just think of it more like various complicated doodles. But that's just been a thing that I've been doing recently. But like, I also do that sometimes just to relax. So like, how does it look any different? So anyway,
right, of course,
I have fallen back in love with MegaOffice.
Oh yeah, no more couch, Mike. I think this is better.
This is much better. So basically, over time, I had only really started to spend time in my office when I was recording or editing, and all of my other work was happening in other places of the house, like at the dining table or on my sofa and that kind of stuff, because I wanted a change in scenery.
Mm-hmm.
But I have also become incredibly more productive this month because I'm sitting in the office. So I'm doing more work, which is so dumb. It makes me feel like a caveman. But I like it. I feel more productive, and I have noticed something about myself which I didn't know before, or at least I couldn't pinpoint it. If I have a day where I do not really have anything to do, I become very lethargic and sad, to be honest, because I'm just doing nothing. So didn't notice about myself. I knew I had those feelings sometimes, but couldn't pinpoint where they were coming from. And I think I've worked it out. And it is like, if I'm not busy, if I don't have stuff to do, it's not good for me. Like I need to be busy in some regard. So now it's a case of like, I don't want to fill up my time more.
Right.
But I need to work out what I do on non-busy days.
Right. Okay.
So that might mean Myke finally gets out of the house sometimes, which could be an interesting endeavor. There's a whole wide world out there to experience.
Yeah, so I've heard.
They tell me. I'm not so sure about it, but they tell me. So yeah, it's just been real. And you know what? I have been very much enjoying using my iPad and my iMac simultaneously. You've seen my corner desk, right?
I was gonna say, so like, what is the setup here?
Yeah.
When you're saying using them simultaneously, what's the exact deal of what's on what?
Mega Office has 2 desks, right? And desk number 2 is my game streaming setup. So it's just like dedicated, it's set up for that. But desk number 1, the original desk, is a corner desk. So on the large side of the desk, I have my iMac, and on the smaller side of the desk, I put whatever. Like it's just where things go. But when I am using my iPad at a desk, I have a great stand. It's called the Clear Look stand. I will put it in the show notes. It can elevate my iPad to eye height, and I use Apple Magic Keyboard and my Apple Pencil, and that is perfect for me because it gives me some kind of consistency in ergonomics, and that's been great for me. So I put that on the smaller side of the desk, and I'm doing a lot of my work here. But then I also have my iMac to the side, and there might be certain things I'm like, oh, I'll just swivel my chair over to the iMac and do that here, and I can have all sorts happening now. So I'm living the multi-device lifestyle, and I really like it.
So, like, are you using the corner desk as 2 desks in a way, or
yeah?
'Cause that's what that sounds like.
Yeah,
so
like the smaller side is the iPad part of the desk,
right?
And the longer side is because it's not like the corner does not. It's not like 2 desks put together, right? It's like I have a large part of the desk and then a small side.
You have a literal L-shaped desk.
It's an L-shaped desk. Thank you so much. Yeah. Yes. So the smaller part of the L is where the iPad
I believe
goes.
That's what they call it in the industry.
And the larger part of the L is where the iMac
If you've seen
goes.
a letter L, think of that, but now think of it like a desk.
So I like it. And I'm still doing the iPad is where I prefer to be. It's like what works for me. But I also like having the iMac here to just pick up some other stuff if I need it. And it's been really nice, actually, to have a renewed focus. I think it was probably time after nearly being self-employed for 5 years this year.
Wow.
I think it's in like November is my 5th anniversary of being self-employed.
That's amazing.
It's probably about time for me to have reevaluated some stuff about the way that I work. And at least where I am in my life right now, I am feeling much more comfortable with entering my office and being here for long stretches of time, getting a bunch of stuff done, and then leaving the office. And this is something that, I get it, but like I'm trying now to be a little bit more conscious of breaking up the work time. That's kind of where I am right now. And I'm finding that for whatever reason, at this time, I am able to be more productive than I have in the past by being in this environment. Where previously, and it's definitely the case, previously my productivity was enhanced by a change in scenery. So being able to move to different parts of the house was really nice for me. But like, people change over time. And sometimes you just get used to something, and then when you get used to something, you get into bad habits. And so being more in my office is enabling me to reevaluate those habits. And I have genuinely been very impressed with myself and my productivity levels over the last few weeks, because I feel like I'm in a bit more control of things than I have been maybe in the last year or so.
That's great to hear. And not only do people change, but the situation that you're in changes.
Yes, that's what's forced this, right? It's like,
that's the catalyst in this situation.
I do not want to be setting the precedent that the living room is also an office now that there are more people here all the time, right?
Yep.
Like, I don't want Adina to have to walk into the living room and feel like she can't be in that space because I'm working in it.
Yeah.
Right. And so like, and she has, we unfortunately are not in a position where she can have her own office at home, but she has a desk area in the bedroom. So we're never in the bedroom in the daytime. So if she wants to go and work, she will go in there, she'll close the door, and now she is in her office, right? Like that is what that becomes in the day. So, and we're both able to be in these rooms when we need to work, and then we can use the shared space as a shared space, like the living room and the kitchen. And I think, at least for me, that has been something that is very important as we are going through this life change together.
Yeah, it's really important to have these clear boundaries. I honestly think this is one of the most important lessons about just, it's really important for your brain to know that certain areas are for certain activities. And it's like, even if you're a student in school, it's like, why do you go to the university library? Because that's where you study. Do you need to be at the library to study? No, not really. In theory, you could do it anywhere, but it's greatly advantageous to have a place that you go, and this is where you do the thing. To have all of these signals set up for your brain. It's like, okay, you're in Mega Office now. Now you're doing a whole bunch of work in Mega Office. And I think having spaces, particularly joint spaces, like the common living area, where their purpose is a little bit unclear, is always a danger. I'm like, what happens in this room? Do we work in this room? Do we relax in this room? I think that's a kind of bad life hygiene. Like, you want to try to separate out the spaces as much as you possibly can. And I always find that, like, if I'm not feeling great about stuff, that it's a kind of contamination of the space, of like, oh, this space is used, like its purpose is unclear. Like, what happens in this space? And you need to reevaluate it. So I'm not surprised to hear that, like, the renewed interest in Mega Office has also led to an increase in Myke productivity. And I think it's equally as important, especially as a couple, to define an area of the house where it's like, this is where we relax.
Yes.
We're not doing work here. This is where we relax. This is the relaxed space.
Yeah, and I feel like it wasn't so important before, because when I was working in there, she was never there, right? She was out of the house.
It's doubly important now that she's on a sabbatical. Like, then it matters way more.
But it is making me look around this office and I want to rip it apart.
Oh yeah? Are you going to redo the office?
It needs that anyway. Like, it has done for a while, like, because there are certain parts of this room that are set up for a 2-year-old version of what this room was for.
Right.
And like,
are you going to get rid of that couch? Is that couch going to go?
That couch was gone a long time ago. The couch,
oh, is this?
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. That's why I put the second desk in.
Oh yeah, because I'm thinking, like, have I even seen that second desk? I guess I have, but it's I think I still think of your office the first time I saw it. Like, that's when it make an impression on me.
Yeah, because you've seen the PC. The PC is on the second desk, right? So like that was what that was for. But there's stuff like, like I have a part of the room which is set up for, like, oh, this is where the video game console will go, but there's no video game console in this room anymore. So
right.
And I have a lot of unused storage and lots of stuff to put into storage. So like I need, and I have a drawer of cables That shouldn't, it gets to a certain point where a drawer of cables becomes one big ball of cables. That all needs to be, I have a lot of that stuff that I want to do.
Mm-hmm.
I need to deal with it, but it's just a thing.
Yeah.
I just have stuff just piling up in here now.
You got to KonMari those cables.
I really want to, and I need to work out which USB-C dongle sparks joy, because right now I'm not 100% sure.
This podcast is brought to you by the letter L. L for desk.